Good morning, and welcome to my presentation on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Although I will be talking through my answers to give it a presentation feel, I have written them in full on the slides should you need any clarification. Firstly, I've listed the questions that I've chosen to answer and will be discussing the protagonists, the relationships between children and adults, as well as gender ideologies, and I will then talk through the appropriate age group and conclude with a significant passage from the novel to support my ideas. So meeting the protagonists, our first protagonist is Lucy. Lucy is the primary protagonist in the novel. She's the youngest of the four children, giving her reason for her naivety. Lucy is curious and the first to discover the realm of Narnia when exploring. She embodies goodness through her kindness as well as her ability to forgive and generally sees the best in people. She does also have a profound investment in restoring peace to Narnia, despite her own questioning of her bravery. Evidence of Lucy's characteristics and protagonist tendencies can be found in her friendship with Mr. Tumnus. Initially, Mr. Tumnus tries to enchant Lucy and plans to kidnap her and give her to Jadis. Lucy is able to convince him to free her and displays emotional maturity through her natural inclination for forgiving his mistake, and eventually actually continues to develop a genuine caring relationship with him. The quote that I've chosen to support this can be found in chapter 2. "Then be off home as quick as you can," said the fawn, "and can you ever forgive me for what I meant to do?" "Why, of course I can," said Lucy, shaking him heartily by the hand, "and I do hope you won't get into dreadful trouble on my account." So in this quote, Lucy's use of language like "of course I can" shows us that she has no doubt about forgiving Mr. Tumnus. This is true to her personality and ability to give others the benefit of the doubt. Lucy then goes a step ahead and wishes Mr. Tumnus well and displays that compassion, reiterating her warm nature, saying, "Oh, I hope you don't get in trouble for that." The second protagonist, who does become the primary protagonist over Lucy, is Aslan the lion. Aslan is the creator of Narnia on Earth and the son of the Emperor over the sea. He is also the king above all high kings in Narnia. Aslan has a strong moral compass. He's wise, brave, and well respected. He's a leader and a legend, and Narnians actually shudder in both fear and excitement at the sound of his name. Aslan sacrifices himself in order to save Edmund and Narnia from Jadis. He's seen as quite a godly being, quite divine, and used as an allegorical representation of Jesus Christ, which is further reinforced through his resurrection, which we will discuss later. Examples of Aslan's authority and magical power can be seen throughout the novel, as he's continuously demonstrating bravery even in the toughest situations, like sacrificing himself. The fact that there's a rhyme about Aslan, recited by Mr. Beaver but known by all Narnians, does show the extent of his reign throughout all of Narnia. The Narnians tend to depend on his wisdom and guidance and truly believe that Aslan will defeat Jadis and restore peace. I've obviously chosen the quote, which is actually the rhyme, so I will read that for you now. "Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death, and when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again." So the opening line makes the point that Aslan will in fact restore peace in Narnia. People do believe that. His great might is highlighted through the description of his roar and his teeth, showing his strength. The reference to the changing of seasons is also quite allegorical, as whilst the Narnians refer to the endless winter imposed by Jadis quite regularly, the change of seasons also indicates a change of lifestyle and pace from a raging war to peace and prosperity. So the next topic is the relationships between children and adults. Adults on Earth do view children as troublesome and inconvenient. This is seen through the way Mrs. McCready treats them, warning them to stay out of her way and refrain from running and shouting in the house. However, the professor does defend Lucy's stories of Narnia and also convinces the other children to give her a chance to prove its existence. So whilst children are generally disregarded, the professor does see their value. In Narnia, it's quite different. Children are treated as equals. They're often referred to as sons of Adam and daughters of Eve, which is an honorable title in relation to the Christian elegy. Aslan is the dominant adult character. He's wise and stern. He does ensure that the children face the consequences of their actions as a form of discipline, and he does set behavioral standards to deter the children from selfishness. Narnians, including Aslan and the adult kings and queens, value and respect the children's input and ideas. This allows the children to grow and develop in a supportive environment rather than allow stagnation to occur due to the restrictions seen in the real world. It's important to note that in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, time is warped, and whilst the children do grow into adults within Narnia, when they return to Earth, they're still children, and only a matter of hours have actually passed. So this shows us that with that positive reinforcement and support, children can flourish and develop better in a world where they're not restricted by adult knowledge only. The next topic are the gender relationships and gender ideology. So in the novel, there are obvious gender roles which would reflect the gender roles within society at the time it was written. This begins with the children's characteristics. So we've got Susan the Gentle, Lucy the Valiant. They're both described as gentle, kind, and curious, whilst the boys, Edmund the Just and Peter the Magnificent, are brave and sensible. Mr. and Mrs. Beaver are another example of the gender ideology. In the novel, as Mr. Beaver tells them about the mighty Aslan and his adventures, whilst Mrs. Beaver sews, cooks, and cleans. Father Christmas is another scene where the children are emphasized through their gender roles. So he gives the children gifts. Peter and Edmund get a shield and sword, while Susan and Lucy get a horn to blow if help is needed and a healing potion. The girls are in fact gifted a bow and arrow and dagger. However, Father Christmas makes a point to reiterate that battles are ugly when women fight. So this further demonstrates the expectation of women to be gentle and domesticated rather than to be actual warriors. Finally, even though Lucy is the main driving force in this novel, so it's definitely a girl's world, Peter does get preference for the title of High King of Narnia, and it's quite upsetting because Lucy is the one who initiated the entire mission to restore peace and did convince all her siblings to help. Discussing the appropriate age group of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So this is a chapter book. It's written for children of all genders, aged between 8 and 12 years old, more or less. It is often a set text over the grades 4 to 6 in schools. Some of the chapters do contain some violence, which may scare younger readers. For example, Aslan's execution in chapter 14, where he's tortured and humiliated. And there are other violent events, including Jadis turning characters to stone, the destruction of Mr. Tumnus's home, and various battles. As the novel does have a strong allegorical Christian representation, the suggestion of dark magic and evil may deter some children or families. The language used is not particularly complex, however, the themes of Christian elegy, children's development, and war requires a certain level of sophisticated learning, which young readers may not understand. This includes the didacticism in the novel of good versus evil. The significant passage that I chose can be found in chapter 15. It's where Aslan is resurrected after being tortured by Jadis, and I will explain why I've chosen this specific passage in the next slide. "Oh, you're real! You're real! Oh, Aslan!" cried Lucy, and both girls flung themselves upon him and covered him with kisses. "But what does it all mean?" asked Susan, when they were somewhat calmer. "It means," said Aslan, "that though the witch knew the deep magic, there is a magic deeper still which she did not know. Her knowledge goes back only to the dawn of time." but if she could have looked a little further back, into the stillness and the darkness before time dawned, she would have read there a different incantation. She would have known that when a willing victim who had committed no treachery was killed in a traitor's stead, the table would crack and death itself would start working backward. And now, oh yes, now, said Lucy, jumping up and clapping her hands. Oh, children, said the lion, I feel my strength coming back to me. So the reason I selected this passage is I feel that it ties together all of the points made in previous discussion. This happens upon Aslan's resurrection and works as a way of tidying up the Christian allegory where Aslan represents Jesus Christ. The first section shows the deep emotion and highlights the connections made within Narnia, and the children do still actually seek Aslan's wisdom to explain his resurrection, so in a sense he is still the adult. The body of the passage where Aslan brings the novel to an almost full circle state, it focuses on the didactic of good versus evil and how good will always prevail. Aslan makes this clear through his display of bravery, so to pay for a sin that he has not committed. There is also a play on the concept of time, noting specifically how Jadis's knowledge was not sufficient and that Aslan is much older and wiser and experienced. Finally, the line, death itself would start working backward refers to Aslan's resurrection and reminds us that he is in fact a divine being, comparable to Jesus. In conclusion, we see Lucy's emotion on display again and the important role that her childlike excitement and behaviors are displayed throughout the novel. The children do actually mature quite significantly throughout the novel, but this is a refreshing reminder that they are still children at heart. We're then left with a reassuring message from Aslan mentioning his strength returning, and that makes us think perhaps peace can be restored throughout Narnia and all of the realms that he acts as a savior to. I've listed on this slide my references, so the only reference that I did actually directly use was the novel, of course, by C.S. Lewis. I have also listed a few others that, although they're not directly linked to this assessment, they have shaped my views and analytical thinking, so I definitely think it's worth giving them credit. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.